Hi.
How you doing, Ajay?
We're good. We're good. Thank you. How are you guys been?
Good. How's everything going with the food truck?
Oh, it's coming along. It's happening very soon now.
Yeah, do you know when it'll be?
Maybe like a month now.
Wow, that'll be
Yeah,
interesting to see how that goes. I'm sure it's going to be successful.
yeah, it's we're excited.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Kavita's going to do the opening prayers again. She has her own. We each have our own different experiences and insights that we are based on taking refuge in all of these prayers. And so Kavita's aren't exactly the same as mine. So I think it's really beneficial to hear somebody else who's been practicing the same amount of time and hear their point of view on all the opening prayers and things. So take it away.
Um, I was reading this week several things because I'm trying to practice single-pointed concentration in the morning and kept going back to trying to understand refuge um, overall. And Venerable Robina Courtin always, before her teachings, mentions that it's good to remember why we're here, of course, because by refreshing our memory why we're here, um, in the long run, can deepen the benefit that we receive from listening to the teachings. And so the prayers start with refuge and the generation of bodhicitta. And they say in all the teachings in our lineage, the Tibetan Buddhists, that the motivation for refuge for us as beginners is that we have this combination of aversion to cyclic existence. Sometimes it's said fear. So the motivation for refuge is these two factors. They say for beginners is fear of being stuck in cyclic existence and all the pain and suffering that goes with being our normal sentient being subject to afflictive emotions and impact of negative karma. The other factor they say is faith. And then once you come in contact with the Buddha and the Buddha's teachings, that you start to develop faith because you see that they are effective and that they're logical and that I was listening to a brief teaching His Holiness the Dalai Lama gave the night before last, and he kept repeating over and over again how important logic and thinking are, and for our practice as Buddhists. So fear and faith, but what dawned on me as Mahayana practitioners to add to this motivation as we begin, we said it in the opening prayer that we're doing this for the enlightenment of sentient beings. And I kind of had the thought that perhaps the motivation for taking refuge is very much the same as why one, say, for example, goes to medical school to learn how to heal others. You're entering the training for the benefit of others. So the corollary would be you're taking refuge in order to achieve the state of Buddhahood that ultimately is to help others in the way that's most effective for them. So that the expansion of the motivation for taking refuge and practicing Buddhism, which we know, but for some reason, after almost 20 years now, it just struck me that the reason for taking refuge is also to help others. So with that in mind, thanks for your patience listening to my thinking process this week. We'll just say the prayers like we've been doing the first time in English, and then we'll chant it in the Tibetan. Visualize in front of you all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas that are carriers of this wisdom and and the methods to achieve enlightenment. So picture all those enlightened beings and bodhisattvas. And around you are your family and friends and all the sentient beings with whom you share this experience of samsara and with whom you share the wish for happiness and to be free from suffering. And with that visualization in mind, as you say this first prayer, imagine golden nectar spreading, coming down from all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and to you and all sentient beings connected in this web of enlightenment. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodam soki chokna la changchu padu dagni yasuchi dagi jinso ki pe sonaki rola pinchir sangye upasho sangye chodam soki chokna la changchu padu Daki Kyapsuchi Daki Chinyen Ipe Sona Ki Rola Pinchir Sangye Drupal Sho. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And then think that you will achieve the state, able to lead sentient beings to these fortunate states. And be very happy that you have found this great Mahayana. So we won't recite the invocation, but just refresh your memory that you're in the presence now. Surrounding you are all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and all the sentient beings. They all are surrounding us and always are surrounding us, not only during these prayers, but at all times, and especially during these teachings. And with that in mind, out of our appreciation and joy for having encountered the Mahayana Buddhist path in the presence of the enlightened ones and the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, all those who've gone before us, out of gratitude and appreciation and a statement of our commitment, we say the 7-minute prayer, addressing them, these enlightened beings. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And then imagine that yourself surrounded by all of the sentient beings and all of the enlightened beings. You're very happy to be able to make these statements to the merit field. And then finally, we'll do the mandala offering. I'm going to do a very fast demonstration of the mudra for those of you who don't know how to do it. So you cross your pinky fingers, let's say the right in front of the left. Then you start folding your hands towards each other, back to back, putting your 2 ring fingers together. They're going to stay in that position. Next, you cross your middle finger. You hook them against each other, and then finally you hook your index fingers. So you end up, I don't know if I can see this. Notice the ring fingers they are a representation of the center of the universe. In this case, in our tradition, we call it Mount Meru. And then you're supposed to, then you put your thumbs down on the middle fingers.
So I think
Everything's kind of,
the middle fingers are the ones sticking up, and the thumbs are down on the pinkies. It gets so confusing.
I'm having a senior moment. No, the middle fingers, this, help. No, the middle fingers are not the ones that are. Definitely.
The thumb are holding the pinkies.
Oh, it's the ring
thumbs are
fingers. The
against
ring,
your
yeah,
fingers.
you're right. It's the ring fingers that
The
are
ring
up,
fingers are
and
up.
the pinkies are the ones that are being
And
held
your
down.
thumbs are on your middle fingers, pressing them down. Sorry, this is supposed to be helpful.
No, your index finger.
Anyways, we're gonna not spend any more time on it. The point is that it's said to be auspicious to either do this or like this, but with your thumbs in the middle representing a jewel inside your thumbs when you do the mandala offering. So either one of those. Now, the point being is to envision that you are visualizing your accomplishment of a fully purified universe full of fully delighted beings and happy beings, healthy beings, truth, beauty, and goodness, and all good things have been accomplished through you and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And that is your offering, that visualization and that determination. Christopher, I keep going back to old melodies, so why don't you lead the Saji Cookie?
Okay. Saje Puki Jukshin Meto Tramri Rabling Ji Nidegen Party Sangye Jingdu Mi De Urwadi Drogunam da Chingla Chepashu Yam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Yayatari.
There's one quick thing I wanted to mention. I just don't know who knows what. On the opening prayer, when it says the other paramitas, it says through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas. The paramitas are that's referring to the 6 perfections. I think paramita roughly translates as far-reaching. So there are these pervasive attitudes that we're meant to abide in at all times. Sometimes it's called the 4 abodes. The 6 abodes.
The 4 abodes are the immeasurable thoughts.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm getting it. Anyways, the 6 paramitas are generosity. These are meant to be sort of practiced in everything you do all the time. Generosity, ethics, patience, enthusiasm, concentration, and wisdom. So this is referring to mindfulness, and this is referring to wisdom, is referring to recollecting emptiness and everything. So,
Okay, thank you. Perhaps we can find I think there's a little illustration of this.
yeah.
And we can post it somewhere, or
I
I'll
know
post
we
it.
don't get into these things, but
Yeah.
but some of the things that Arthur's been sending and sort of linking science and
Yeah,
what we do. I mean, the subtle channels in our body are a real thing, and they terminate in our hands. So where you put things creates energetic connections in particular ways for particular uses.
all these mudras, stuff
Anyway.
like this, and
So that's why, even though we don't have the answers to all these questions, I'm always saying the Tibetan monks I know don't do things just because it's cool.
yeah, I recall there is a little illustration somewhere
There probably is.
of this, which
There's probably an
will
online
show us.
video how to do the.
When the monks were first teaching us, this at way back at Baoguang Temple, I don't know when, 2005 or something. It was just amazing. The whole, and there were maybe 30 people, because this was very really like new to everybody. And so nobody could get it. I mean, it was just, and so the monks were going around the room, like to each person, putting your fingers in the right place. It's very hard to describe. So we'll work on that. All righty then. So now we are continuing with Nagarjuna and the precious Garland. And Nagarjuna is now getting into a very long and extensive part of his text that deals with the nature of liberation and emptiness and how to realize emptiness. So this is just the beginning of it. There are some major ahas in this particular section for today. There were major ahas for me that I hadn't fully, and Kavita as well, that in the past 18 or 19 years, we hadn't fully grasped a particular aspect of the two truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth. So when we get to that, I'm going to emphasize it so that we all remember it. But we begin with, we'll begin with a review, just a short review of last time. And it's good to review this. It's nothing like we don't need to hear again. The process of our suffering persists because we misconceive the mental and physical aggregates to exist inherently and independently. The way they appear, the way everything appears to us. It appears as if everything is inherent and independent. That's just our default. This mistaken view, supported by our ignorance of the nature of reality, leads to both virtuous and non-virtuous actions that are contaminated by ego self-grasping, this I-grasping. So every action we take, whether it's a negative action or what we think of as a positive action, there's always the ego is in there. You know, you're doing something because this is going to be good for me. You know, it's in a very ego self-grasping kind of way, and we don't necessarily see that in terms of what we think of as our virtuous actions, but they're all sort of tainted and contaminated by this ego self-grasping, this innate I grasping, which is the basis of cyclic existence. So this I grasping induces birth and rebirth in cyclic existence through the 12 links of dependent origination, which we talked about last time. Won't go over it. The afflictive emotions of ignorance, desire, and hatred, combined with contaminated karma and then rebirth into cyclic existence, mutually feed on each other in a beginningless way. So it's just been going, according to the Buddha, this has been going on beginninglessly, which is another concept that we've discussed a lot, and it's important for us to find a way to be comfortable with that, to find a logical way to be comfortable with that. And we discussed a lot about that previously. By understanding the aggregates of form, feeling, discrimination, conditioning, and consciousness, all the six consciousnesses. When we understand that they are empty of inherent existence and not real in an ultimate sense, the misconception of an inherently existing I is overcome. So when we understand that the aggregates themselves don't exist inherently, then there's no basis or foundation for the I to arise. As a result, karmic actions contaminated by ego self-grasping do not arise, and new psychophysical aggregates that become caught up in cyclic existence are not produced any longer. So that's just a kind of overview of what we discussed in the last couple of sessions, really. Now we go on to the road to liberation.
Where are we in Nagarjuna?
We're in we're in the book is divided into 3 sections, not really chapters, but 3 main sections. We're in a section called Higher Rebirth and Definite Goodness, and this subsection is, the nature of liberation, which is going to be a long, long section, subsection, I should say. If things existed inherently, they would necessarily have to arise inherently. That's just logical. If things exist independently, then they have to arise independently. Obviously, that isn't the case. We can see that. When we carefully analyze, it's found that things always arise from multiple causes. If you think about it, it's really true. And those multiple causes arise from other multiple causes ad infinitum. You could go all the way to the far regions of the universe and galaxy, and you would still find everything was being affected or caused by something else. That's just the way things are. Liberation from the suffering of cyclic existence is contingent upon realizing that all dependently arising phenomena are not truly existent. And by truly existent, that is a word in Buddhism, in the wisdom teachings, that means they are not independently self-existent. That's what truly existent it means in this case. By repeatedly familiarizing ourselves, this is what meditation is. We familiarize ourselves. So even just thinking about something, analyzing something, that is a form of meditation. It's a form of familiarization. It's a very important type of meditation, initially, especially. So by repeatedly familiarizing ourselves with this point that things arise dependently, the deeper our understanding will be of the multi-layered, multifaceted nature of dependent arising. And the more convinced we ourselves will become that phenomena lack true, inherent, independent existence. So that's pretty clear, yeah? Our problem is that we've been so conditioned to think the other way. It's almost like a default. We don't even stop to analyze that things are affected all the time by causes and conditions, and that's how they arise. It just seems like, boom, there it is. It exists independently, and I either want it or I don't want it. It's kind of like that. It's very basic. So wisdom realizing emptiness, wisdom that realizes emptiness counteracts ignorance, this kind of ignorance that doesn't actually analyze, it doesn't actually observe, it just takes things as the status quo, the way it's always been, the way you've always thought about it. You don't think about it, you just go, oh, God, and I'm unhappy. And why? It's somebody else's fault. They did it. We don't take on board that there are all kinds of conditions and causes going on in our body, in our mind, in our own thinking that cause us to have particular reactions to particular kinds of things. This is what is causing our own suffering, and it comes from a misunderstanding of how we exist. So wisdom realizing emptiness counteracts ignorance, and that's the first of the 12 links, you may recall. That's how the whole thing gets set in motion. When that ignorance ceases, the karmic actions that are motivated by the ignorance cease. There's no longer a basis for these contaminated karmic actions. And with the cessation of the afflictive emotions and contaminated karma, then this kind of compulsive rebirth into cyclic existence and the suffering of cyclic existence ceases. It just stops. It's no longer compulsive. An enlightened being may choose to appear in cyclic existence for the benefit of others, but it's because it's for the benefit of others. It's not because they just couldn't help it. They were just drawn into it out of their ignorance and afflictive emotions and karma and all of this kind of stuff. So now we're going to get into an important topic, which is called the 3 higher trainings. I don't think we've talked too much about this, but the 3 higher trainings are the actual, you could say they're the cause of liberation from the suffering of cyclic existence. So these 3 higher trainings are ethics, no surprise, concentration, which is referring to a concentrative kind of meditation, the single-pointed concentration. So you have ethics, concentration, and then wisdom, and that's referring to the wisdom that realizes emptiness. Those are the 3 higher trainings that lead to liberation from the suffering of cyclic existence. The wisdom directly realizing emptiness must be very focused and very certain in order to overcome all self-grasping. That focused certainty of wisdom realizing emptiness necessarily requires very stable concentration. Stable concentration necessarily depends on training in the ethical conduct of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions and engaging in the 10 virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind. So ethics here, they're talking about mainly talking about abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind, and engaging in the 10 virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind.
Which you could reduce down to refraining from harm, but engaging in help.
Refraining from harm with your body, engaging in benefit with your body, refraining from harm in your thoughts, engaging in your speech, engaging in benefit with your speech, and then refraining from harm in your thinking, and engage in benefit in your thinking, your motivation, your intentions.
And your wishes for others.
Yeah, intentions, wishes for others, yeah. We should also keep whatever precepts that we've taken, such as there are 5 lay precepts: no killing, stealing, lying, taking intoxicants, and adultery. There's also monastic precepts, bodhisattva precepts, and tantric precepts that one can take. If we've broken these precepts, they can be renewed. They can be renewed. It's not as if the world ended and you're doomed to eternal suffering and cyclic existence because you broke your precepts. That's not the point of precepts. The point of precepts is to sort of help us, to help guide us, to give us a direction. Eventually, as practitioners, what we realize is exactly that these vows and these precepts are there to help us. And the more we recognize that, the more natural it is for us to keep those vows and precepts. Of course, there are going to be some that are quite difficult, and that indicates that there's something there that we really have to work on, that's very deep-seated in our consciousness.
Venerable Robina says something on this topic that's kind of interesting and increases your motivation in a way. She says that if you take a vow, for example, I will not kill, that even when you're just leading your normal life, that vow is almost like it's like in the background of your consciousness, an attitude that throughout the day, even when you're not in a situation that might involve killing, you are generating merit because you've taken the vow. And this is true for all those vows, that by taking the vows, say you just commit to the 10, refraining from the 10 non-virtuous, and so all the time when you're not lying, all the time when you're not stealing, all those live in you, and that's your universe from which you operate, and as such it creates, it's uplifting your energy all the time.
Yeah, and that's in the way they present that, there are basically 2 sides to it. There's the refraining from these 10 non-virtuous actions. And then the flip side is that you're engaging in the opposite of those 10 non-virtuous actions. You're engaging in 10 virtuous actions. So that becomes incredibly powerful, because what you have going on all the time, running through your consciousness, is that I'm going to, I'm going to be beneficial. I intend to be beneficial, and always I don't intend to harm. So the two become combine and become extremely strong. The more you practice it, you find that you just will not, I won't even kill an ant or a spider or something like that. I will look for ways to remove them or, help them. Because it's always now in my mind, having done, the 7 limb practice over and over and over again, it just is there.
I was telling Christopher yesterday, this is a good sign. I'm cleaning up the carport finally to make it an appropriate workshop, and I was moving a piece of a shelving that had been there for a long time. And hundreds of daddy longlegs were living underneath the bottom of it. And I just had to stop because I didn't want to kill any of them. I didn't want to displace them. I need to figure out how to relocate them without harming them. And this is reminding me of, you saw 7 years in Tibet when they were building a little building for the Dalai Lama, and the monks took forever because they were digging through the dirt to build the foundation with teaspoons so that they wouldn't kill any worms.
They were building a
It
movie
kind of
theater.
does slow down your process. But it sounds crazy, but it's much better to be moving in that direction than in desensitizing your tendency towards killing.
Yeah, because that's how it starts. I mean, we desensitize ourselves to killing ants and spiders and bees, and then, larger animals, we desensitize ourselves to that. And the more over time a consciousness gets habituated to killing, then it's just a step to, kill another person. You're just moving. It's because you're saying this is okay, I do this, I do this, I do this. People do this. So it's really important. It's very important. That's the first one, don't kill. That's the very first one.
I hate to keep, I'm sorry, but I was reading Garland Rinpoche. He was one of the meditator monks in Upper Dharamsala, where Geshe Drakpa also had a meditation hut.
They knew each other, yeah.
And Garland Rinpoche was pointing out that when you take refuge and generate bodhicitta, and when you are aspiring to enlightenment, and when you are talking about non-killing, he said, you should remember all of the microorganisms that live within your body and on your body, because you obviously have a very strong karmic connection with them. And they may be the first ones that you lead to enlightenment, because they are witnessing you and your practice and benefiting from, the changes that you're making.
It's interesting. This is the way these monks think.
He goes much further, but
yeah. Okay.
It makes antibiotics a questionable thing.
Cultivating the 3 higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom is the key to reversing all the suffering of cyclic existence and attaining liberation. So these are important: ethics, concentration, and wisdom. Remember, these are the 3 higher trainings. Since the 3 higher trainings arise dependently, the Buddha advises us to begin by focusing on the very first level of mind training, practicing ethics. If we are continually engaging in the 10 non-virtuous actions and breaking our vows and precepts, our minds will be too unhappy, too disturbed, and too distracted to even be able to practice concentration, let alone achieve it. I mean, it's true. It is true. Try practicing concentration sometimes when you're really furious at somebody and see what happens. Basically, what you'll concentrate on is how terrible they are, how furious you are. It's not very helpful. Once we have some ethical stability, we'll be able to make progress with our single-pointed concentration. So ethical stability comes first, then the ethical concentration. I mean, the stable concentration.
We work on them all together.
Exactly.
The way
When we've gained stable concentration, we can really begin to focus on the job of realizing emptiness directly. Of course, it's important to begin familiarizing ourselves with each of the 3 higher trainings from the very start, from the very beginning of our study of Buddhism. This is why our teachers give us the refuge visualization and the 7-limb practice at the very beginning of our Buddhist studies. Both of these practices familiarize us with the main elements of the path to liberation and to enlightenment. So within all of those practices, there are the practices of sutra, the practices of mantra, the Mahayana practices, the Bodhisattva practices, the tantric practices. They are all in there. Once you go through these various levels and you start studying these various higher disciplines such as tantra, you'll realize, oh my God, from the very beginning they were talking about tantra. We were actually doing it, not realizing that's what we were doing. So these first practices they give us are super important because they're involving our visualization capacity. They're involving our analytical meditative capacity. They even involve our concentrative capacity at some of these points where you're stopping and you're just imagining what it is to be at the center of a lotus that is about emptiness, and you just concentrate on the emptiness of your being. I mean, that's a concentrative meditation practice, and we don't necessarily realize that at the very beginning, that's what we're doing. Tantric practices are when in the visualization the Buddha enters our body, becomes one with us, and then we become the Buddha we have the capacity to be, and we are visualizing ourselves emanating Buddhas and helping all other sentient beings to attain enlightenment. That's a tantric practice, but we don't realize that at the beginning. So it's
practice.
It's also a long rim, stages of the path. It's Mahayana, basically. Mahayana practice.
Just, I don't know, are you moving on from this? Okay, just one last thing about ethics. Because I asked when Venerable Robina came to San Antonio a couple of years ago and did a weekend workshop on purification practice. And at the time I was feeling very guilty and afflicted about not observing some of the commitments I had made to the monks. Not so much that I was breaking vows, but I felt. So I just want to share her advice because I found it incredibly helpful. And this has to do, I was raised Catholic, and so Catholic guilt is it really is a thing. And I'm sure other traditions have it too, where you feel like once you have transgressed, I still feel, and I used to say this to Christopher all the time, I'm going to Buddha hell. I felt like I was thrown out, like I didn't deserve to continue to practice because I had done something, quote, wrong. And so I went up to go visit Venerable Robina to discuss this with her. And I started to lay out, the commitments I wasn't keeping. And she, in about 30 seconds, my visit with her was no longer than 1 minute, and I'm not exaggerating. She said, Kavita, just effing do it. That's it. And then she said, ask the others what time they want to have dinner. And that was my instruction on how to repair broken vows and transgressions and so forth. It's just effing.
Yeah, Venerable Robina did not say effing. She said the actual.
Get back on track. That's purification enough.
The wonderful thing about her is how clear and direct she is.
So I share that with you. I think we all find that our experiences are often common, and I think one of the big obstacles to my practice in general is that I tend to be all or nothing in my thinking. So either I'm going to do everything perfectly, or I'm a complete loser. And of course, that's incredibly unrealistic in every avenue of your life. And so, that advice from her has been so helpful, and I shared it in case any of you have a tendency to have this all or nothing problem that I have.
The interesting thing about that, if one feels like one has to do everything either perfectly or then I'm a complete loser. Well, what we automatically do is then we project that onto everybody else. Either they're great and wonderful, or man, God, I can see a flaw in that person. What a loser they are. You know, we just project what's within us onto what's without. So that's very important to remember. If we start to take a much more holistic view of ourselves, we will project that out onto everyone and everything else as well. And we won't be so hard and critical and judgmental and unforgiving of others if we cannot be so hard, critical, judgmental, and unforgiving of ourselves. And that's just psychology, and it's a potent psychology, and it works. It's very helpful. So, the benefits of realizing emptiness. The benefit of correctly meditating on emptiness and then realizing it is that we have the means to end our suffering completely. We have the means to end our suffering completely. So somebody else has it and is going to bestow it upon us. We have it. We can do it. This is why it's so important at the outset to thoroughly examine the Buddha's presentation of emptiness so we correctly understand its meaning. We do this by using logic and inferential conceptual thought. That's how we start. We don't start by, having a realization and having it, dawn on us. We have to use our logic. We have to use our thinking. We have to use concepts and see what is the Buddha saying here. If we hear about emptiness, but we don't examine it thoroughly, and therefore we misunderstand it, we can develop an aversion and fear toward it. Because we don't fully understand what the ultimate lack of inherent existence in all phenomena actually signifies, we become terrified of emptiness. What we can do is we can see it, emptiness, as a threat to our very self-existence as I or me. That if we have a direct realization of emptiness, I no longer will exist. I is gone. Me is gone. That's what we're afraid of. In this way, our own minds are the things that are preventing us from moving in the direction of liberation from suffering. Our own minds. The tragedy of misunderstanding emptiness and being afraid of emptiness is that it causes us to continually wander in fear, instability, and the suffering of cyclic existence, when in fact the very thing we're all seeking is the release from suffering. So this is the benefit of realizing emptiness and getting over the hump of somehow being afraid of it or not interested in it.
I think it also contributes to, you said this, but I'll just repeat it. I've found that it contributes to my ability to view others with more equanimity.
Yeah.
Christopher and I have two individuals in our life right now who are presenting lots of challenges and thinking and talking because we're not sure how to help them, quote unquote, because they're both struggling in various ways.
I mean, they're both kind of asking for help.
Different ways. And they're both asking for help indirectly. And what I noticed is that I have a tendency to reduce both of them. These are individual humans who are dependent arisings, who are, appearances of dependent arisings with infinite causes and conditions and factors, good qualities, neutral qualities, and not helpful qualities. All this stuff, all these talents, ways they're much better than me, ways that they're, extremely great and glorious. And I have this tendency to reduce them down to this little two-dimensional thing that is this problem in my life. And I don't know if you know what I mean, but it's like when I see them, all I think is you are, this is your problem. You have this problem, and that's my relationship with you. you can, I mean, I think we all
Right,
do this when there's,
right.
especially if we're concerning people with issues, you
And
know,
the
a daughter
thing-
who's a drug addict, or a friend who's a kleptomaniac, or a sex addict, or, you know, you name your thing, and you, every time you see them, you go, there's that, you know,
Yeah.
porn addict, you know.
And the thing is, like we said before, we set the bar.
As if that's all they
We
are.
set the bar so high for those others in our life, you know, and we focus on that one thing that is like, this is the problem. We don't realize that then we turn around and we're doing the exact same thing to ourselves by doing that.
So I'm just.
We set the bar way too high for ourselves.
The dependent arising nature of the individual that's appearing to me. I mean, there are things about them that they don't recall, even this glorious stuff, and I think it's good to think. You know, outside of this lifetime and this set of problems that they seem to be.
Well, another way to think is that, you know, we are all in the same
Yeah,
boat.
yeah, I mean, honestly,
You know, and we're all experiencing a very similar kind of existence. The details are different, but the emotions and things like that are the same.
my reason for injecting was just that it's somehow empty, thinking about emptiness.
Yeah, right.
It's-
I mean,
it's
that's will
that
actually help.
arising.
So, yeah, right. Okay. Now, this is now the point of the text where Nagarjuna begins what will be an extensive explanation of how to discern the correct and incorrect views of the ultimate nature of reality. So what we're going to talk about here is conventional truth, ultimate truth, and the middle way, the Madhyamaka, the middle way. So in order to do this, Nagarjuna explains emptiness and the type of wisdom that realizes emptiness. This type of wisdom is free of two extremes. And here they are called absolutism and nihilism. In this context, the extreme view of absolutism is a philosophy which incorrectly believes that inherently existent appearances are all part of an absolute objective reality. That is the same objective reality for every conscious being, everywhere and always, regardless of individual cognition or differing situations. This is very much like when Claudia was describing the ways different species view or the way their outer world appears to them. It's different. It is different for every species. In some cases, the difference is quite subtle. It is different for even among each member of a species. Each one of us human beings have a different kind of perception of the world as it appears to us. So there is absolutism is an idea that there is an objective reality, and it is the same thing for everyone, everywhere, all the time. So that is a mistaken view, according to Buddhism. That's one of the extreme views. The extreme view then of the other extreme view is nihilism. And nihilism incorrectly believes that if things don't exist objectively and inherently, they don't exist at all. That's it. It's quite simple. If it doesn't exist objectively and inherently, then it doesn't exist and nothing matters. This is the problem with nihilism, the nothing matters business. The middle way, the Madhyamaka view that Nagarjuna advocates, avoids these two extremes. Someone who realizes the middle way knows that while all phenomena are empty of inherent existence, they still exist. How do they exist? They exist by continuously depending on other factors and being merely designated by names, labels, and thoughts. Because of this middle way view, there are two truths associated with it. Ultimate truth and conventional truth. Ultimate truth is the emptiness of inherent existence. And conventional truth is the infinite diversity of phenomena that appear to be inherently existent, although they are not. So ultimate truth is the emptiness of inherent existence, and conventional truth is the infinite diversity of phenomena that appear to be inherently existent, although they are not inherently existent. Conventional truth and ultimate truth are not two unrelated realities. They depend on each other, and they always arise together in combined existence. Emptiness is the ultimate nature of all conventional truths. Emptiness also exists conventionally. Emptiness exists conventionally. It sounds strange to us when we hear that emptiness is the ultimate truth, yet exists conventionally. And here's the kicker. What we always have to bear in mind and remember is that conventional existence is the only type of existence there is. I'll repeat that. Conventional existence is the only type of existence there is. This was an aha for me. I had never read it or had it taught to me in quite that way, although that's what they were saying, but I didn't hear it. I'll say it again. Conventional existence is the only type of existence there is. Nothing exists ultimately or inherently. Emptiness is itself empty. Emptiness is not some kind of absolute or independent existence that is unrelated to conventional truth or anything else. It's not as if emptiness is something out there that we have to, where is it? What does it look like? How do I experience it? It's not something out there. It's all around, all the time, combined in everything. It's part of conventional existence. It's the mode of conventional existence. Empty of inherent existence, meaning the mode of conventional existence is that everything is continually, constantly arising dependently and is empty of any kind of inherent self-existence. So emptiness is part of conventional existence. It goes hand in hand with it, like I said before. The two go together. This is a big, big, big thing.
I think.
We have to think about this.
At a very superficial level, which is where I tend to live, so I'm assuming this is not uncommon, that when I hear conventional existence, I almost immediately go all the way to, yeah, we all agree there's a sofa there. And, oh yeah, we all agree there's cars, and we all agree there's a country called Lithuania, and we all agree that sugar's sweet, so forth. But it's actually, I believe it's more subtle what this statement is revealing, that the only mode of existence is conventional,
Well, the only existence is conventional existence, and the mode of it is.
Right. The where I was going was like, there's not like some layer of everything we accept is conventional existence, and it's more subtle than that. It's we are only able to apprehend the existence of something because it bubbles, it comes together, it arises out of a massive sea of potential, which is the state of emptiness. It's
Right.
It's emerging out of a state of continual possibility.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really didn't convey.
Yeah, this also gets into when we talk about selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena. It's important to remember phenomena, in selflessness of phenomena, is referring to our own aggregates, their physical and their psychological and emotional aggregates. And the way those aggregates interface with whatever's out there, whatever's out there, our aggregates interface in a particular way with it. Just like the fly interfaces with its environment in a particular way that's quite different than the human interfaces with their environment. It has to do with the aggregates. And so this is all part of dependent arising. All part of what emptiness is talking about.
Yeah.
So the conventional existence that appears to us is a dependent arising based on our psychophysical aggregates and the way they interface with the energy or whatever you want to call it that's out there.
By that, you could almost, maybe it's a stretch, you could almost logic that this is a dependent arising form of emptiness,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
right. You could say that. Right.
Because when you break it all down,
Yeah,
there's nothing there, right?
it's a dependent arising.
Right, so
There's nothing inherent that's inherently existing that there's something that's continually, as we know, we can logic it out. That pillow is not the same pillow that it was when it was brand new. It has seen a lot of action, a lot of wear, a lot of tear. It eventually will disintegrate and be gone. And it's constantly shifting and moving like that. So there is no inherently
Not to
existing.
mention all the causes, but yeah.
Yeah, but and then if you go into the causes that went into the pillow, you'll soon be out into the universe. And all and everything that's involved, all of the various kinds.
So
of,
one phrase that I've read in something that objects that we see are like bubbles coming forth from emptiness. Imagine
yeah,
bubbles just kind of popping up out of the
Yeah.
water.
they don't have any. It's a very transient kind of constantly
Pillows
shifting
like a
existence.
bubble coming.
Yeah,
It is kind of freaky, yeah.
Right, so it is a. The terminology is, or the words are probably incorrect, but to some extent, it's a form of emptiness.
right. Yes,
Well, in the Heart Sutra,
emptiness is form.
form is empty, emptiness is form.
Right,
It's the same
What else
thing.
is it saying there?
right,
It's quite literal.
yeah,
And this is why, I was saying initially what we have to do is we have to use our logic and our reasoning to sort of work this out conceptually. We can't have a direct experience of this yet, but we have to, just like you are doing and we all are doing, we're sort of logically going, I guess that pillow is really an example of emptiness, and it is but you have to logically, you can't just say it. This is what happens. I mean, this is what happens typically when when somebody first comes into Buddhism, because we haven't been trained in the subtlety and the nuances of all of this. We'll just immediately go, oh, well, it means that this is all an illusion and it doesn't exist. And that's a huge mistake. That's going toward nihilism. That's going toward the wrong view of nihilism. It's the opposite view of like everything exists inherently and is the way it appears to us, and and this person is that person, and man, I don't like that about them. It's very nuanced, and the kind of conceptual thinking that we have to do about it, analysis that we have to do, is a very nuanced kind of analysis that we're not used to doing. And like I said, we should try and think of ourselves as like some kind of scientist of consciousness and the mind and how it exists, and really dive deep into this and dive deep into what they're saying, so we can begin to get a conceptual idea of what it is. That will help us tremendously when we go to concentrate, to have a concentration on what emptiness is. So, now we go on. The fear of emptiness is mistaken. So this brings us to the next stanza. And the stanza says that all these will not exist in nirvana does not frighten you. Why does their non-existence explained here cause you fright? So this is what's going on here is there's a Nagarjuna starts to give us a hypothetical debate between the Prasangika school of tenets, which is the highest school. It's the Madhyamika Prasangikas, which they have the highest view of emptiness that Nagarjuna is a proponent of. And they're having a debate with the lowest schools of tenets, the Vaibhashikas and the Sautrantika schools of tenets, that do have a belief in inherent existence, that things exist inherently from their own side, the way they appear. So as a Prasangika, they are saying to the lower schools that all these will not exist in nirvana does not frighten you. Why does their non-existence explained here cause you fright? So I'll explain that. Not only non-Buddhists fear emptiness because they misunderstand it, but so do some Buddhists. According to the two lower schools of tenets, the Vaibhashikas and Sautrantika schools, when those practitioners hear when those practitioners of the hearer and solitary realizer vehicles, which we talked about previously, when they achieve their fifth and final path of no more learning by eliminating all of their afflictive obscurations and becoming arhats, they obtain what is called nirvana with remainder. Nirvana with remainder. And now I'll explain this. It's called with remainder because although arhats have eliminated all the afflictions and karma that were the cause of their rebirth in cyclic existence, they still remain in their cyclic existence bodies that were born under the influence of afflictions and contaminated karma. So they haven't died because they have had a direct realization of emptiness. Nobody that I know of. It's not said that you die because you have a direct realization of emptiness. You have a direct realization of emptiness, and everything changes for you in depending on what vehicle you're at and what you're expecting. When the arhats eventually die and they leave those cyclic existence bodies of theirs, they obtain what is called nirvana without remainder. So nirvana with remainder is that they have a body that remains. They haven't left cyclic existence physically, you could say. Their body still remains. That's nirvana with remainder, but their mind has had this direct, realization of emptiness, both the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. When the body dies, according to the arhats of these lower schools, they obtain what is called nirvana without remainder, without that cyclic existence body. So now I'll explain what that is. Nirvana without remainder. The Vaibhashikas and the Sautrantikas believe that at the time of nirvana without remainder, the self and the psychophysical aggregates, including the subtle continuum of consciousness, completely cease and are forever extinguished. So it's total lights out, gone. You don't exist. It's gone. It's over. You're completely non-existent, including your consciousness. That's what nirvana without remainder is for the arhats. They also believe that when the Buddha passed into parinirvana, which means the passing into cessation, that's what parinirvana means. At the time of his actual death in cyclic existence, the continuity of his consciousness and the other aggregates of his were ceased and extinguished. So the Buddha also completely lights out, gone, forever extinguished. These tenet systems do not posit the continuing pure emptiness of a Buddha, which is called the Dharmakaya, the enjoyment or bliss body of a Buddha, which is called the Sambhogakaya, or the many emanation bodies of a Buddha, which are called the Nirmanakaya. They only accept the supreme emanation body of the Buddha that first turned the wheel of Dharma in this universe. So they only accept the body of Shakyamuni Buddha as Shakyamuni Buddha appeared in this universe and turned the wheel of Dharma. After Shakyamuni Buddha died, gone, lights out, extinguished. Although he abandoned all suffering, they believe that in his, this is interesting, they believe that in his last life as Siddhartha, as a bodhisattva on the path of preparation, the second of the 5 paths to enlightenment, he was born as an ordinary being, still under the control of afflictions and karma. Under the Bodhi tree, he destroyed what are called the 4 maras or demons, the mara of contaminated aggregates, the mara of delusions, the mara of the Lord of Death, and the mara of desire and temptation. And at that time, he attained enlightenment. Although he abandoned all suffering, the lower schools believe he still experienced pain since he had the same type of contaminated body he had at his rebirth into cyclic existence. So at the time of when he was enlightened under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha was still alive. So he had what they call nirvana with remainder. He still had his cyclic existence body. It hadn't died yet. It had gone into parinirvana. After he passed away and attained parinirvana, the continuity of his consciousness ceased, and having attained nirvana without remainder, the consciousness of the Buddha became non-existent. This is what the lower schools say. Proponents of these lower schools, then, don't understand the Mahayana assertions that the Buddha had attained full enlightenment eons ago, but purposefully took birth and appeared as Siddhartha, a kind of emanation body, to lead sentient beings on the path to liberation. By appearing to be an ordinary being who worked hard, overcame obstacles, and attained full awakening, his life became a teaching in itself that encourages us to practice. He was basically showing the whole way you go about this, and he taught this. Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas, the 2 lower schools of tenets, also affirm that all phenomena inherently exist, because if they didn't, they wouldn't exist at all. It's kind of a nihilistic view, really, when you think about it. Because of this, they become afraid when the Prasangikas say that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence. They think this means that existence of any kind is negated by emptiness. They think the Prasangikas are saying that when arhats attain liberation with remainder, in other words, they've had a direct realization of emptiness and they are still living in their cyclic existence bodies, that they and their aggregates of form and consciousness immediately will become non-existent. That they will attain this realization of enlightenment and boom, everything's gone, lights out, they're extinguished, even though they were alive in their body when this occurred. The Prasangikas hear this argument that the lower schools are making, and they respond to this by saying that if the proponents of the lower schools of tenets believe that their aggregates of form and consciousness become forever non-existent when they die at the time of nirvana without remainder. So what they believe, what the lower schools believe is, then when you die at the time of nirvana, it's nirvana without remainder and everything's extinguished. So your cyclic existence body is still alive after you've had a realization of emptiness. Then you die and you're completely extinguished. So the Prasangikas say, well, if you believe that, if you think that, then why doesn't it frighten you? Why does it frighten you when the Prasangikas explain that there are no inherently existing persons or aggregates before they die at the time of nirvana with remainder? As far as the lower schools are concerned, what difference does this make to them? Either way, it's going to be extinguishment and lights out. But somehow there's a problem that the lower schools have with this. So we go to the next stanza. and this is in quotes, as if the lower schools are saying this. They're saying, in liberation, there is no self and there are no aggregates. So then the stanza goes on, and it's from the point of view of the Prasangika answering. If liberation is asserted thus in this way, why is the removal here of the self and of the aggregates not liked by you? Why do you have an objection that that so what if you're thinking that you're going to die when you have a realization of emptiness while you're still alive, what difference does it make to you when you think you're going to be completely extinguished when your body dies? That's what they're saying. So he's in this hypothetical debate. The Prasangikas ask the Vaibhashikas why they object when the Prasangikas say there are no inherently existing persons or aggregates at the time of nirvana. Their own Vaibhashika system asserts that at the time of liberation, persons and aggregates become completely non-existent and extinguished. So if there are no persons or aggregates at the time of liberation, there are also no inherently existing persons or inherently existing aggregates at the time of liberation. The Vaibhashikas reply by saying they object to the Prasangika's view of emptiness of persons and aggregates at the time of liberation because liberation itself exists inherently. This is the thing. The Sautrantikas, Vaibhashikas think that liberation itself is an inherently existing thing. The Prasangikas respond to their Vaibhashika debate partners, saying that if liberation exists inherently, it would have to consist of either, and here are the two options of inherent existence. It would either have to be an inherently existing person, meaning an inherently existing I or me, or the other option is it would have to be inherently existing phenomena, which is inherently existing aggregates and how those aggregates interface with what is outside of those aggregates. So they would have to be inherently existing aggregates and an inherently existing objective reality. So those are the only two options. You either are inherently existent I and me, with an inherently existing aggregates and an inherently existing objective reality, or it's not that way. There's no third option, in other words. When arhats attain nirvana, the self-grasping of both persons and phenomena have been completely eradicated by the wisdom that directly realizes emptiness. Remember that the self-grasping of persons refers to the construct of an I or me, while the self-grasping of phenomena refers to the 5 psychophysical aggregates and the way in which any phenomenon appears through the interface of those aggregates as being either mine or other than mine. So that's all there is. That's all there is. There's the selflessness of person or the selflessness of phenomena, or the self-grasping at a person and the self-grasping at phenomena. That's what it is. The objects of those two self-graspings, inherently existing persons and inherently existing phenomena, this is for the Vaibhashikas, have also been eliminated because the meditator has realized they are non-existent. For that reason, nirvana cannot be inherently existent. The Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas assert that nirvana is the elimination of the afflictions and the elimination of the contaminated aggregates, both of which they say exist inherently. Obviously, these particular Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas who are having this debate have not attained nirvana themselves, because I don't think they would be having this conversation in quite the same way. They say if the contaminated aggregates and afflictions existed inherently before nirvana, then nirvana could never be attained because things that exist inherently can never change and can never be destroyed. This is because they would be independent of all other factors. Oh, that's what the Prasangikas say. I'm sorry. The Prasangikas say, if the contaminated aggregates and afflictions existed inherently before nirvana, then nirvana could never be attained because things that exist inherently can never change and can never be destroyed. This is because they would be independent of all other factors. That's an amazing statement of what independent self-existence is actually logically, when you take it to its full logical assertion, what it's saying is, because you are independent of anything, nothing can actually affect you. Because if it did affect you, it would mean somehow you were dependent on what it did. But inherent existence, a self-existent and independent existence, that would not happen. It could never be destroyed. It is some kind of permanent thing that is impossible, because we all know that we are affected all the time by what people say, what people do, the weather, how things appear. We are constantly being affected by these things, as is everything else, is being affected constantly, which means that they don't exist independently at all. Because if they did, they couldn't be affected by anything. This is the clarity of conceptual thought that we have to get to when we're trying to understand what inherent existence is and what the absence of inherent existence is, what emptiness is. Additionally, the Prasangikas say nirvana is not the elimination of inherently existent afflictions and aggregates. It's not the elimination of inherently existing afflictions and aggregates. A realization of emptiness does not make something that was previously inherently existent suddenly empty of inherent existence. All phenomena have always been empty of inherent existence. The realization of emptiness destroys the grasping at inherent existence, but inherent existence itself never existed. The Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas also claim that at the time of nirvana without remainder, when the cyclic existence body has died, they say that the aggregates no longer exist. Prasangikas disagree, because if this were true, then at the time of final nirvana, there would be no one who attained nirvana. If the aggregates ceased to exist, there could be no basis of designation of the person. And in an opposite way, when the contaminated aggregates exist, and thus the person exists, there could be no nirvana. Because according to the Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas, nirvana is the cessation of the aggregates. The tenets of these lower systems lead to many contradictions. Now we're sort of wrapping this up. Yeah, this takes a lot of reading and poring over, and there's a study guide. It's hard to even get this upon the first reading and just go, oh boy, what's Nagarjuna saying here? But if you read it several times, if you think about it, it's valuable what he's saying. So when the Prasangikas say that the self and aggregates are eliminated in nirvana, they mean that the self-grasping of persons and the self-grasping of the aggregates, in other words, the self-grasping of phenomena, are extinguished. The grasping is extinguished in nirvana. That's what the Prasangikas are saying. Therefore, inherently existent afflictions, aggregates, and self, all of which never existed in that way to begin with, are eliminated in the sense that they are no longer apprehended and grasped by the mind. That's what nirvana is. Only emptiness of inherent existence appears to the mind. There is no remainder of the appearance of inherent existence. In this way, the Prasangika system leads us to see that nirvana and emptiness are not separate things. So for the Prasangika, nirvana without remainder is this experience that has no remainder of grasping at inherent existence, grasping at self, the I, grasping at all of the afflictive emotions, we let them go. They're all gone. They just don't appear anymore for us because we've realized that they never existed in the first place. It's mistaken, a mistaken consciousness. So this brings us to the last stanza for today. 42. Here's another one. When I first read this, I thought, oh boy, gobbledygook, I don't understand what the words are saying. If nirvana is a non-thing, just how could it have thingness? The extinction of the misconception of things and non-things is called nirvana. I'll read it again. If nirvana is a non-thing, just how could it have thingness? The extinction of the misconception of things and non-things is called nirvana. Okay, so here we go to Kensur Tekchok's explanation. A thing is an impermanent and conditioned object that produces an effect. You know, a pillow, you lay your head on it, it produces the effect of being soft, you know. A non-thing is a permanent or unconditioned phenomenon. Something that can never change and is not subject to any kind of causes or conditions that will affect it in any way. That is a non-thing. Nirvana cannot be an inherently existent thing because it is neither inherently existent nor is it a thing. So a thing is, again, definition coming from the Prasangikas, a thing is an impermanent and conditioned object that produces effect. So he's saying that nirvana cannot be an inherently existing thing because it is neither inherently existent nor is it a thing. However, the Vaibhashikas say that nirvana is a thing, like a dam that stops the movement of water and has the function of stopping the continuation of afflictions and rebirth into cyclic existence. But the Prasangikas say, if nirvana was a thing, it would age, it would cease, it would be affected by other things, in which case it would not be unchanging, lasting peace. The Sautrantikas, the lower school, say that nirvana is the cessation of afflictions and samsaric rebirth and is inherently existent. If nirvana were inherently existent, it would have to either be, as before, self of persons, the I or a me, or the self of phenomena. Some form of aggregates and the way everything appears to those aggregates. But it's neither, because those two kinds of self have never existed, those inherently existing selves, they've never existed. Neither self-grasping of persons nor self-grasping of phenomena exists at liberation. And those two selves that have the two types of grasping and apprehend two types of grasping also do not exist. Wisdom realizes that they are non-existent. Some say that nirvana is the mere destruction or disintegration of the afflictions. According to the Prasangikas, if that were so, nirvana would then be impermanent because it could have that effect on something. Prasangikas assert that the destruction or death of something or someone is a thing. It is an affirming negative that produces an effect. For example, although death is a negative, it is a conditioned phenomena that is produced by birth. without birth, there would not be death. The destruction of afflictions and karma is similarly a thing that is produced by a cause. In this case, the cause is the wisdom realizing emptiness. However, nirvana is permanent. It is a non-affirming negative, an absence that doesn't imply anything in its stead. It's not a thing. It is a non-affirming negative that just, it's finished. There's nothing there. And so what we're again, nirvana is the realization that there never was a self-existing inherent person or phenomena to begin with. It is now gone. It won't come back. It's a permanent realization that occurs. Since nirvana is not an inherently existent thing, it cannot be an inherently existing non-thing either. This is because non-thing, this is so weird, non-thing, but it's true, is posited in relation to thing. An inherently existent phenomena must be totally independent and unrelated to all other factors. So in other words, non-thing dependently arises from thing. If you have a thing,
Yeah,
then you have a non-thing. And it's saying, nah, if anything is permanent like that, it is not a dependent arising at all. It is just an absence.
you know, here's a weird example, say
So that's it.
this
So
room
discussion.
is empty of having Santa Claus in it.
Yeah,
So it's empty of Santa Claus, but we can't talk about the emptiness of there being no Santa Claus in the room without first having to posit that there's such a thing as Santa Claus.
Right.
It's kind of like that, so we can't posit the emptiness of Santa Claus without there being a Santa Claus. So we can't posit the non-thing without,
right. We cannot, we
Positive
can't, all we can say, all that can be said is nirvana is a cessation.
yeah, I mean,
That doesn't affirm anything.
it's, this is where I was going. Sorry, I forgot my whole point. Yeah, they say, this is kind of cool, if you think about what this would be like. They say you do the analysis like I just did.
Santa Claus.
This room is empty of Santa Claus, and we know that a Santa Claus not being here pops into our head. That's kind of an affirming negative. There's a Santa.
Right, we all of a sudden picture
They
Santa Claus.
say that when we have a direct realization of emptiness, we do this analysis, and suddenly the realization of the emptiness of phenomena arises, but nothing comes in to replace it. So it just mere emptiness. They call the realization of emptiness a non-affirming negative because nothing rushes into our consciousness to.
The classic example that the monks gave us of an affirming negative is this statement. The fat boy doesn't eat during the day. So immediately, what pops into your mind? Oh, he must eat at night. So it's an affirming negative. It's saying that fat boy does not eat during the day. All of a sudden, it's affirming that, oh, well, he has to eat during the night because he's a fat boy, and you can't be fat without eating. That is an affirming negative. A non-affirming negative is nirvana. It's just a cessation, and nothing
I'll give
pops
the example that
into
you
mind.
gave more than once, which was a non-affirming negative is like when you go looking through your chest of your desk for your car keys. All the drawers are empty and there is no car keys. There are no car keys.
And it's not affirming
And there's nothing,
that there are car keys.
it's just no car keys are there.
Right.
And we kind of panic a little bit.
Right, and
We
so.
actually know that feeling from when we misplace our wallet or our keys or our driver's license or our passport. We've all had that moment of, oh my gosh.
They do say that when you are approaching a direct realization of emptiness, or maybe your first direct realization is, and this is coming from those highly realized meditators who have had this experience, there is a panic. Like the panic when you thought your keys were in the drawer and they're not there, or you thought your wallet was there, but it's not there. And there's nothing that is, affirming, nothing else is affirming what happened to the wallet or the keys. Of course, we will always go, oh, well, I must have misplaced them somewhere else, and we continue to look. So it's not the best example, but the Nirvana one is a pretty good one.
Overall encouragement always comes, I think this was Nagarjuna, who said that even just to contemplate these things like we are forever destroys our concretizing things
Yeah,
as inherent.
right. It wasn't Nagarjuna, and he said it said something. It's something like an analogy. It's like once you even contemplate emptiness or think, or it enters into
Like we
your
are.
awareness, like it's doing now, you already have your foot in the door to liberation from suffering, and that will not recede. It's always going to, this emptiness thing is going to stay in your mind, and eventually, either in this lifetime or another lifetime or a future of something, you will finally come to that realization, because when you actually analyze it, it's logical, and you can't really fight logic. You can't turn away from logic. And that ultimately, it's not just, oh, it feels nice. It actually makes sense when you thoroughly analyze it. So it is time to stop. But this is just a reminder that this is just the beginning of a whole section on the nature of liberation that Nagarjuna is going into. And it's probably, I haven't read ahead enough to know, but it's probably going to be more like this. So it's kind of like thinking cap time, and it's all good. This is what we need to be doing. Any comments or misunderstandings or confusion in this, what was presented today? Silence.
All right, closing prayer.
So closing prayers.
Okay, so here we all are together, and picture yourself as part of this, we're on the USS Liberation starship, zooming through the galaxy, through space together. We've met up in the captain's bridge to discuss our strategy for how to exist in a happy way so that we can go forward and spread happiness. So now we have concluded our gathering of how to attain happiness and enlightenment and help others. So we're all going to now go back to our separate jobs on the USS, or the Starship Liberation, and think like that we've come together to explore this, and we're going back to our own specific roles. We'll be back next week. Don't forget to bring your uniforms and your transponders. And
Don't forget to go to the holodeck.
we'll check in the holodeck.
We live in the holiday.
We live in the holodeck, right?
So may this precious bodhicitta that we are trying to cultivate, not yet born, genuinely arise in our hearts. And may that which has arisen in our hearts and minds not decrease, but increase forevermore. And as we go forth, may this discussion and our understanding of how things exist in reality not be decreased. May it only grow, and may it flourish and lead us eventually to liberation and enlightenment. So we dedicate our time together in this discussion to the complete actualization of these two factors, bodhicitta and the view of emptiness. And then we think that without the Buddha and the Buddha's messengers and the teachings and the conveyors of the teachings, all the lamas that we've all had the benefit to know, and people such as Christopher willing to keep it going, may we never ever in our journey through the cosmos, may we never be separated ever from valid dharma such as this, so that ultimately we do achieve the ultimate state of a complete Buddhahood and only are a benefit to the cosmos, uplifting all the beings that we come in contact with forever. So in all our lifetimes, never separated by perfect masters, may we enjoy the magnificent Dharma, completing all the qualities of the stages of the paths. May we quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Beam me up, Scotty.
Really, I love it. I love the starship. What is it?
The Starship Liberation.
Liberation.
It's like that.
Okay.
You all have your assignments, you know where your workstations are.
Thank you, everybody.
Feel free to wear your
Thank you.
costume.
Okay. We will say goodbye for now until next time.
Thank you, Chris, Kavita.
You're so welcome.
I sort of had an amusing thought, which was, I feel like Tammy Faye and Jim Baker. Remember the couple they used to?
Really?
Yes, Tammy Faye and Jim. They had a TV show and they were sharing their Christian views.
Yeah.
She would always sing a song at the beginning of the.
All I remember was her crying a lot and her mascara was all
Yeah,
over her
yeah.
face.
She became famous for her makeup.
Ah, yeah, okay. Whatever.
Tammy Faye and Jim Baker.
All
Okay,
right.
everybody, peace and love. Don't forget your
All
stars.
right.